This is We the People with Forrest Wilson. And now, here is Forrest Wilson.
Hello and welcome to The Resistance. I don't know if you saw this. House Speaker John Boehner and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi joined forces last Wednesday evening as the House passed a continuing resolution that will fund the government after the end of the fiscal year on September 30th and will permit funding for Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider, the entirety of Obamacare. That means they're going to stick it to you no matter what. And an amendment requested by President Barack Obama to train and equip appropriate vetted elements of the Syrian opposition.
The vote today is about one very discrete piece, and that is the training of these rebels.
Man, she had to take a breath before she said rebels. Well, you know, all this got me to thinking, and I really am kind of disturbed. And I guess, it goes back to this whole concept of three branches of government. You know, I'm reading this Gallup poll and I'm thinking, wow, these results are really interesting. And I'm going to tell you about the poll, but part of it had to do with the three branches of government, the legislative branch getting the lowest rating in this particular poll. But then there's this story that was reported last week in the Washington Post. Only 36% of Americans can name the three branches of government. Wednesday was Constitution Day, the 227th anniversary of the signing of the United States Constitution. And it was signed on September 17th, 1787, hence our website, We the People 1787. But only 36% of Americans can actually name the three branches of government that our Constitution created. And that's according to a new survey from the Annenberg Public Policy Center. And this whole thing took me back in time to a place where I was standing in front of a customs agent in Miami. And I'm trying to enter the country from the Bahamas. I'd been over there for a couple of days with some college buddies. And I think I was in my third year of college. And here I am with no passport. I didn't know I needed one to come back in. I knew I could get out with one, but getting back in, I thought was the same process. So this customs agent is asking me to name the three branches of the federal government, and I couldn't name one. And all I had was a driver's license in my suitcase. So I really couldn't prove that I was a U.S. citizen. But this quiz that he kept giving me, I mean, I had no idea what he was talking about. And I was almost denied entry, but, there I was. I couldn't name the three branches of the federal government, something I should have learned literally a decade ago in middle school. And this customs agent, feeling sorry for me, he gives me, we're literally in an unair-conditioned part of the Miami airport, and he gave me the answer so I could enter the country. Right up to that point, I was literally one of the 64% of Americans oblivious to the three branches of government. I mean, I was nothing more than a useful idiot. I was in college. But this is what I'm thinking about as I read this Gallup poll. I mean, how many could actually give an honest answer to this poll? I mean, only 36% understand there are three branches of government. So I go to the poll, and here's the poll question. It starts out, as you know, our federal government is made up of three branches: an executive branch headed by the president, a judicial branch headed by the United States Supreme Court, and a legislative branch made up of the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives. So for the 64% who are listening to this broadcast, now you know there are three branches of government. So first they had to educate the respondent. Then they asked the question. And interesting results. You could probably guess the legislative branch came out with 28% have a great deal or fair amount of trust in the legislative branch. 43% have a great deal or fair amount of trust in the executive branch. and 61% have a great deal or fair amount of trust in the judicial branch. So it was all really interesting, and I could have guessed that the legislative branch would wind up on the bottom. But I really wonder how the government's able to justify their actions. And I'm sure that even a smaller percentage of Americans know that the federal government derives their power from the consent of the governed. Hence poll taking. They want to know, do they have our consent? I mean, if that's true, then based upon the Gallup poll, the president and all of the Congress have lost the trust of a majority of the people. And I guess you could say, in some respects, the consent of a majority of the people. It's a very similar concept, I believe. But how many people were even aware of the concept? That's the consent part. In other words, the government derives their consent from the governed. I mean, is it 36%? Like this poll that says 36% of Americans can't name, or only 36% of Americans can name the three branches of government. 64% cannot name. I mean, do 64% understand the concept of consent? I mean, and then we have this primary several weeks back. And, we're trying to choose a Republican or Democrat nominee for the various local and federal campaigns in the next election cycle. By the way, the election is November 4th, 2014, Super Tuesday. But less than 17% of registered voters showed up at the polls. I mean, this is a politician's dream. Very low turnout. Less than 17%. And we rehired many who, in my view, really should have been fired. In fact, I personally would fire anyone elected prior to 2010. I mean, the recent results, at least at the federal level, I mean, some of the local folks I'd rehire, but at the federal level, I'd fire anybody hired before 2010. I mean, how can anybody defend all of the things that have happened here as of late? For example, I mean, I'm going to give you a couple of them. The VA waiting room. I mean, we're killing many of our veterans in these long lines to get health care, government health care from the VA. This avoidable Benghazi attack, as this thing unfolds, it looks like there were multiple opportunities to protect and render aid to the ambassador and the people that were killed with him. The IRS targeting opponents of the Democrat progressive agenda, then attempting a massive cover-up, emails missing, documents missing. I mean, this is sickening. And then this fast and furious gun-running scandal, the massive bailout of failed financial institutions, your tax dollars going to bankers. You know the difference between you and a banker? If you've got $1, you can loan $1. If a banker has $1, he can loan $10. It's called fractional reserve lending. And I guess, that hadn't hit home quite yet. Let me knock it out of the park with you. If you've got $1, you can charge interest on $1. If a banker has $1, he can charge interest on $10. In other words, money that doesn't exist. Why do we need to bail out these failed financial institutions? We've got a mechanism. It's called bankruptcy. But I wonder how many even are aware of that. And then there's this complete and utter disregard of the law of the land by many elected office holders. I mean, sworn in to uphold and defend the Constitution. Most notably, the president with his various executive actions. And now we've got the reckless endangerment of American citizens through this open door policy, non-enforcement of immigration laws, and not completing these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In other words, pulling out too soon. And we're planning what? We're going to arm and train rebels? I'd take a deep breath too before I said that. Rebels? What rebels? We don't know. We have no idea who these people are. And many of these elected officials at the federal level will not even use words like Islamic terrorist, war, or even illegal alien. No, they use words like enemy combatant, counterterrorism operation, and undocumented immigrant. This is a huge part of the problem. We have to call it by what it is. Shame on any politician who attempts to obfuscate for political gain. I mean, take this idiot from San Francisco. What the hell is wrong with San Francisco, Jack? Here is the Nan from San Fran again. I want to play this, get the other clip out.
The worse it gets there, the less reason I think we should send in troops.
You know, the worse it gets, we're going to have to send in troops. I mean, at some point, they can kick this can down the road, I guess, until President Obama leaves office and they secure their positions for the next 2 years. But they want to train these rebels and expect them to fight this war on our behalf. But we have no idea who these rebels are. So they voted in this quote-unquote bipartisan measure, beginning in the Senate with a 78-22 vote, clearing the way for the U.S. military to train and equip Syrian rebels for a war against Islamic State militants, and a new strategy that our president sketched out about a week ago. Do we have any idea who we're dealing with? I think not. And I think it's crazy. And many on both sides of this reject this strategy, not to mention the time it will take. They're talking about training these folks in Saudi Arabia, and the process taking up to a year, according to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey. So what are we going to do for the course of the year? I guess we're going to drone them and attack them with the fighter jets, but what if they blend into these various cities and you can't tell who's who, and just wait it out? I guess that's the plan. We'll bomb them for a year and nothing more while we're training up our fighters. I say that we take our folks in, people we know, our U.S. military, and attack these folks and wipe them out and mop them up in short order. I mean, I just don't think we can rely on these rebels. And I think enough has been said. I mean, the president was calling them various doctors and veterinarians and accountants and whatnot. I don't believe any of this. And, you know, all of this makes me wonder if this is the information that we're getting, what else is going on? I mean, really, what else is going on? Does our government even know who's in Syria and Iraq at this point? They can't even tell us who's in this country. We've got millions of people here and we have no idea who they are. How are they going to determine who over there is on our side? I'm going to take a break, and after the break, I want to bring in somebody that you're going to find fascinating, and we're going to question him on all of this stuff. And then we're going to open up the phone line so you can ask some questions. You're listening to The Resistance, AM 600 and FM 100.3. Forrest Wilson. Stay tuned.
Let's return to We the People with Forrest Wilson. Once again, here's Forrest.
You know, I want to play this clip one more time of Nancy Pelosi. She just takes a deep breath before she says rebels, because I don't think even she believes this is a sane strategy. Go ahead, Jack. Play that one more time.
The vote today is about one very discrete piece, and that is the training of these rebels.
She takes a deep breath, training of these rebels. I want to bring in Robert Spencer. He's the director of Jihad Watch. It's a program of the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the author of 13 books, including 2 New York Times bestsellers, The Truth About Muhammad and The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam. His latest book is Arab Winter Comes to America, The Truth About the War We're In. Mr. Spencer, welcome to The Resistance. How are you?
Just great, Forrest. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm going to call you Robert if that's okay.
Of course.
Robert, you heard the clip of Nancy Pelosi. Is this a good idea to arm these people that we have no idea who they are?
It's incredibly foolish. Actually, what we know about them makes it even worse. The Obama administration has said that they want to arm the Free Syrian Army. Now, the Free Syrian Army has openly collaborated with the Islamic State that it's supposed to be fighting and that we're now going to give it arms to fight. The Free Syrian Army has said, we're not interested in fighting anybody except Assad. So are they really going to fight the Free Syrian Army that they've collaborated with anyway? The Free Syrian Army has, on 3 separate occasions at least, gone into Christian villages in Syria, ransacked the villages, drove the inhabitants out, and destroyed the churches. And these people are the moderates that we're going to be helping out? It's insane.
You know, it almost looks like we're setting up, if this was successful, and I don't think it's going to be successful either. I think these people are the same terrorists that we're going to ultimately fight. But if we were successful, we'd have nothing more than a proxy war going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be a matter of time, just like before. We can't stay in Iraq forever. And so as soon as we're gone, or as soon as the proxies are gone, the jihadis will reassert themselves. The problem is nobody is willing to deal with the ideological roots of this and address that. And so as long as that remains true, these kinds of groups like the Islamic State are going to continue to crop up.
You've written extensively about those Islamic roots. Give us kind of a sketch of what you're talking about.
Absolutely. The Islamic State considers itself to be the restored caliphate. The caliphate is the supranational, beyond national unity of the Muslims in a single state. The ancient Muslims, that is the early Muslims in the first couple hundred years after Muhammad, were ruled as a single caliphate. After that, there were caliphates for most of the period of Islamic history, up until 1904, when the secular Turkish government abolished the caliphate. Now, the point is that ever since then, jihad groups, all the different jihad groups, every last one of them, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah, Boko Haram in Nigeria, Al-Shabaab in Somalia, Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines, every last one of them, and all the others I could mention, they all have as one of their primary goals the restoration of the caliphate, because they consider that without it, the Muslims are disunited and they cannot wage jihad properly, because only the caliph has the permission, authority, that in Islamic law, to wage what is known as offensive jihad. It might seem hard to believe, but right now, all we see in the and all we have seen years has been classified by the Islamic jihadis as defensive. Even 9/11, they say, is defensive. That's why when you see Osama bin Laden and others explaining why they did what they did, they always reeled off a list of grievances, because it was all because of all the terrible things that non-Muslims had done. They had to justify it as defensive. But with the caliphate, they don't have to. And as a matter of fact, they have the responsibility to declare jihad gratuitously against non-Muslim states on a regular basis. So this is the desire fulfilled of all the jihad groups, and with this, jihad terror activity will become even more frequent and violent, as has been already.
And we're beginning to see that with this ISIS group. Now, I had spent some time back around the first Gulf War in Saudi Arabia, and this is the home of Wahhabism. It's also the location of Mecca. How does Saudi Arabia fit into this scheme, and are they funding some of this?
Saudi Arabia is not funding the Islamic State, but the Islamic State is, in a very real sense, a monster they created, because Saudi Arabia for years has been spending billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to finance the spread, the propagation of this view of Islam all around the world. And the idea, including that, is the idea that the caliphate is the only legitimate government for Muslims. And so then a caliphate arises very close to their doorstep, and it's saying, well, not the Saudi kingdom's not legitimate either. There has to be a single caliphate, and that's the only legitimate government for Muslims. And so now they are in the very peculiar position of having spread this point of view everywhere, and now they find it threatening their own position. And so they want the caliphate gone, they want the Islamic State destroyed, but if they come out too strongly against it or too openly against it, then they face an insurrection. People mostly believe that the caliphate is the only legitimate.
Hey, Robert, I can barely hear you. I think you're breaking up slightly there.
Sorry.
That's okay. What we're going to do is I'm going to take a little break here in about 30 seconds, and we'll try to get you back on the line. But while you're still there, with all of this unfolding, it's hard to believe that we don't have some policy to prevent these potential ISIS fighters coming from the U.S., returning to the U.S. with a U.S. passport. And I understand that they had drafted a bill, Cruz, Ted Cruz down in Texas, senator from Texas, had drafted a bill to prevent Islamic fighters from returning to the U.S. And after the break, we're going to try to get you back on the phone here. I want to talk about that and how this was blocked, because to me, that just seems insane. It almost is reckless endangerment for the American public. Okay, we're going to try to get Robert back. I want you to listen to what Robert Spencer has to say. Just amazing stuff, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you this story here. But we do not have the ability right now to seize passports from someone returning from the Middle East who has fought with ISIS. And it was blocked last week, the legislation was, by a Democrat, first-term Senator Mazie Hirono from Hawaii, Democrat senator, saying that she and other Democrats wanted more time and likely pushing the issue off until after the November elections. Now, I guess there's no urgency for them in this particular situation, said Senator Cruz on the Senate floor. Hirono said that she chose to throw up a roadblock because legislation that grants the government the ability to strip citizenship from Americans is a serious matter raising significant constitutional issues. I'm sick of all this crap. These people really need to be held accountable. When we come back, we'll finish our conversation with Robert Spencer, and I want you to call in with any of your questions. You're listening to The Resistance, AM 600 and FM 100.3. The Answer. We'll be right back.
I think it's time we stop.
Let's return to We the People with Forrest Wilson. Once again, here's Forrest.
And we're continuing our discussion with Robert Spencer, the director of Jihad Watch. His latest book, Arab Winter Comes to America, The Truth About the War We're In. Robert, it just amazes me that we don't have any way to stop Islamic fighters from returning to the United States. These are people that are United States citizens who leave this country, go to the fight, and potentially come back on their U.S. passport.
It's astonishing, Forrest. Look, the people who go on the United States passports to join the jihad of the Islamic State, they're committing treason. They're going to fight on behalf of a group that has declared war on the United States and made it perfectly clear that they intend to commit jihad mass murder attacks here on American soil. And so these people, if they are United States citizens, they are traitors. They have all the rights and privileges that traitors ought to have, which means they should not be allowed back into the United States. And they should be, if they are, they should only be escorted to a prison cell. This is a ridiculous situation that we have in the U.S. government when Ted Cruz, as you mentioned before the break, introduces legislation to ban these people from returning to the United States, and it's blocked by Senator Hirono of Hawaii. I mean, I don't know what on earth she's thinking. It seems as if sometimes the left has no care, no concern for the consequences of the positions that it takes, and to have a greater concern for the civil liberties of avowed traitors than for the people in the United States who they have declared their intention to murder is appallingly short-sighted, and I hope she is decisively defeated for re-election next time.
I as well. I think a number of the Democrats in the Democrat Party have lost their way, as well as many Republicans. But these guys are experts at convincing people that martyrdom and jihad is a worthwhile endeavor. I mean, they've gone so far. I'm not sure how they're doing it, but they're taking these men, these hostages, and they're making these videos, and they're really well done. I mean, you've got this guy now, John Cantley, and his video. It looks like they've got more than one camera. and he's making the case for ISIS, and he goes on to talk about all the reasons why the Islamic State exists and how the Western media can twist and manipulate the truth. But what is the truth? What are the two sides of this story? We know our side. What is their side?
Well, their side is that the only legitimate government, as far as they're concerned, is a government that's based on Islamic law, because they think that Islamic law is the law of God and comes from God, and is thus perfect, and is the only way that society should be ordered. And the idea of a government based on laws devised from human consensus, from parliamentary debate or from voting or something of that kind, they think that that's blasphemous. And thus the United States is, by being a champion of democracy, championing the rebellion of societies from God, and thus has to be fought and destroyed. This is their view. This is how also they're motivating people. You know, you were saying you weren't sure quite how they were doing it. Well, they get people on their side by making them think that it is something that is pleasing to God to kill. The Quran, the holy book of Islam, says that paradise is guaranteed to those who kill and are killed for Allah. And this is the basis on which suicide bombers are recruited, that they're promised paradise, they're promised this eternal reward. All they have to do is kill some infidels and get killed in the process.
Are there any moderate Muslims? Is that even possible?
Well, there are plenty of moderate Muslims, but it kind of depends on the definition of the word. If you mean Muslim who rejects this understanding of Islam, this understanding of Islam is mainstream and standard. But does that mean that every Muslim is acting upon it? Absolutely not. Most Muslims, like most other people, just want to live their lives, have a job, raise their families, take care of the people around them, and that's it. There are those who are very devout and very knowledgeable about their faith, and these are the kinds of people that we see turning to jihad terror, and this is the problem. There are other Muslims who reject in principle these ideas, who are actual reformers, but they are really quite few, because Islam is a penalty for heresy and apostasy, and that rather discourages reform.
Well, I go online and try to read the Quran. There's an English version online. I think it's Quran.com. And, the verses are violent. And it's not just one or two. It's throughout the Quran.
Absolutely. It's the only religion and the only holy book that has a doctrine, theology, and legal system that mandates warfare against unbelievers. This is not a matter of a few passages being taken out of context, and people always say, oh, well, the Bible has violent passages in it as well. Actually, the Bible never commands believers as such to go and wage war against and subjugate unbelievers as such. The Quran does.
And that is the disturbing part of it. So what do you think's the end game? I mean, are we going to have any level of success over there, even if we put boots on the ground and wipe out ISIS? Is it just going to come back?
Yeah, I think that the only chance that we have of stamping this thing out altogether is just to stay there forever. That obviously. And even staying there would not even accomplish that unless we deal with the way and the reasons why they join the Islamic religion. We're never going to confront them. Right now, when the president is so anxious to say that the Islamic State has nothing to do with Islam and statements of that kind. And so the problem that we face is that as long as there are people who believe in Muhammad as a prophet and the Quran as a holy book, there are going to be people who think that it is their responsibility before God to wage war against unbelievers and kill them or subjugate them or convert them to Islam. This is not something we're going to be able to address ultimately with military action. Now, the problem is compounded by the fact that there's complete denial of this fact at the highest levels in Washington. And so the policies that the Obama administration is pursuing are based on fantasy and wishful thinking. And look at that. So if the Islamic by U.S. military action, there would be some other group that would come up that will pursue the same goals. The only really thing that we can do to counteract this is a version of the containment policies that were pursued during the Cold War that just wasn't practical for. I mean, we make it now so that it just isn't for jihadis to wage jihad because they have no chance of victory in a military sense and in a cultural and societal sense. The Islamic law states that you do not wage jihad if the enemy has more than twice your strength and you don't have any chance of victory. And 100 years, there wasn't this jihad activity around the world. There was some here and there, but nothing like the global violence that we see today. And this is because the West in those days was much stronger, culturally as well as militarily, than it is now.
Yes, and I think the pullout of Iraq was really kind of the tipping point for this holy jihad. But yeah. I do agree with what you're saying, and I guess it's just disturbing to hear it. I've been reading on your website, Jihad Watch, and let me make sure I get your website right. Can you give that to the listeners?
Sure, it's jihadwatch.org. That's JIHAD Watch.org, updated many times daily with news and commentary of jihad activity.
I mean, it's hard for me to talk to you about this. I can't imagine a policymaker trying to make policy understanding, because I'm sure they've got plenty of information on this, what we're up against here.
It's the problem that this is a very difficult situation, because like what we faced before. It's not a nation state that's declaring war, although the Islamic close to being one. So it's hard to say what victory would constitute. And when the president is intent on saying that this has nothing to do with Islam, he's really saying we're not going to deal with the beliefs that give rise to this. And that means they're just going to keep giving rise to it. He could be and should be challenging Muslim groups in the United States to teach against this understanding of Islam, to institute programs that show Muslims why it's wrong. When we see especially the Islamic State recruiting in mosques in the United States, and a couple hundred young Muslims have already gone from the United States over to fight in Syria and Iraq with the Islamic State. This ought to have been done already, but nobody wants to address it because nobody really wants to acknowledge that there is any problem that the mosques do need to address.
And apparently, in addition to these young men, they're also recruiting teenage girls. I read on one of your reports, these two teenage girls from Bosnian origin that came out of, I believe it was Vienna. And this particular imam over there inspired them to travel to Syria and get involved with ISIS. Yes.
Well, it's attractive to young girls who are encouraged to go over actually and aid the fighters. And that aid takes all the forms that one may imagine. It's been quite a scandal, actually. There was a big uproar in Algeria about this last year. And jihadi, it seems as if there were some imams who were saying that young girls would be blessed by Allah if they went over and waged what they called sex jihad with the jihadis, and thus became essentially prostitutes in their service. And there were Algerian government officials denouncing this and trying to prevent it. But it's happening now more than in just Algeria, but also from countries in the West. And so here again, this kind of thing is not going to end until the ideological underpinnings of it are confronted, but nobody is doing that.
No, and I think our plan to train quote-unquote Syrian rebels is misguided, as you pointed out earlier in the interview.
Quite so. I mean, I thought it was funny what you pointed out about Pelosi with her deep breath before rebels, as if she knows these are not good guys and these are just more jihadis and we shouldn't be aiding them. But, of course, she's committed to the path that the president gives her.
Robert Spencer, the director of Jihad Watch, I want to thank you for your time today, as disturbing as it was, but I look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I'm going to take a break, and when we come back, I'm going to give you some more information. I'm an information junkie, and I just have to share it with you. This is going to blow your mind, as most of the things on this show do. I hope you'll stay tuned. Forrest Wilson, The Resistance. Our lines are always open, 904-222-TALK, 904-222-8255. Give me a call sometime. We'll be right back.
Now, my girl, you're so young and pretty.
Let's return to We the People with Forrest Wilson. Once again, here's Forrest.
That was a sobering interview. Robert Spencer, director of Jihad Watch. It's really, this is going to take a long time. We're going to be fighting this war for generations. But all of this brings up Plato's quote. One of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. I don't know about you, but I just don't think a whole lot of our leadership in Washington. And I think even less of the Democrats. And look, I can't help it if you're a Democrat. You can change that. The problem is that it really doesn't matter what you think you are. You know what we have become? We've literally become a nation of socialists. Yes, we're socialists. And if this continues, many of us will be victims of a drug gang or some jihadi from the border. And it's amazing to me how successful these guys are at recruiting jihadists. It's also amazing that they're going to let these people back in the country. The one thing that Robert Spencer didn't say is what Ben Barak said the week before, and that is these folks will be monitored by the FBI. They're going to let them back in on their passport, these traitors, and they're going to monitor them with the FBI. I want to take a call. We've got who's calling in, Jack? George. Okay, George, you're on The Resistance. How are you today, George?
Pretty good, and you?
Oh, I'm doing real good.
As I told you before, I lived in 3 Muslim countries, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Brunei, and my ancestors were Knights Templars who signed treaties with them, and part of Islam is not to honor treaties. To understand Islam, you can't just read the Quran. You need to read the Quran and the history of Islam at the same time. The Quran is written in a taqiyya form. Have you heard that word before?
I have.
Okay, taqiyya is to obscure or hide the true nature of Islam, which is to conquer the entire world and put us all under this edict of cutting our head off for certain things, sawing our head off for certain things, cutting our hands for certain things, etc. And one of the best sites I've found to understand both the Quran words and the history of Islam at the same time is IslamReview.com. Spencer's site's really good, but if you want to truly understand Islam, go to that site, which is written by former Muslims who are now Christians.
Well, George, you take the Quran, the one translated into English, and you read it, and you can really get a gist for the Islamist perspective of the West. In fact, the Islamist perspective of the unbeliever. It talks about holy jihad and taking out the unbeliever in various ways throughout the Quran.
Right. If you understand the history, which is things like Muhammad personally sawed the heads off of 1,000 Jewish men, enslaved their women, because they would not support his efforts to completely take over the Arabian Peninsula. Then you understand why ISIS and the others like them do exactly what they're doing. They're just following exactly what Muhammad did, and Obama is practicing taqiyya when he says, what they're doing over there is not Islam. It is Islam. It is the purest form of Islam, and the only way to stop it is massive, overwhelming force, number one, and number two, reforming the entire religion. And you cannot write a book and say it's a Quran, or they will all come after you, but you can certainly write a book which says these are the best ways to live, and you put the 60% of the Quran, Hadith, Sharia law into that book, and say, okay, this is what we're going to do, and here's how to confront your friendly, moderate Muslims. You say, look, we have an internet site we'd like for you to sign, and that site says we're going to reform Quran and just put the Quran, reform Islam, and just put the Quran in the library. And watch their eyes, watch their fingers. They will twitch. They will try to give you standard speeches of 10 minutes and kind of overrun you just like the liberals do. There's so many commonalities between progressive liberals and communists and true Islamists, that they get along very well together. They finance each other.
George, I want to get onto a commercial that I had from New York, but before I let you go, I got a question for you. I've had a number of guests on this show say that not only is this administration, our president, a communist, but I've actually had people say that he's a Muslim. What do you think?
Right. His true hero was Nasser of Egypt. I worked in Egypt to clean up a lot of the mess that Nasser did, and Nasser brought the USSR in there, as well as he was pushing the country systematically towards radical Islam. And so there is a lot of commonality, and I gave you the 6 points of conquest previously, and those are the same 6 points of conquest by communists as well as Muslims. And so his real hero, again, is Nasser, and he is doing everything he can to pretend he is not a Muslim, but he is one of the most radical Muslims, one of the most radical communists that I've ever read about.
Interesting. Okay, George, I appreciate the call. So we've got another Democrat, Bill de Blasio in New York, giving out illegal aliens a perk package for getting a free ID. I mean, these guys will do anything to recruit voters. But this came across my desk, and it says, in an attempt to encourage illegal immigrants and other New Yorkers who do not have identification to sign up for the city's new municipal ID, Mayor Bill de Blasio announced this week that those who participate will be eligible for a wide range of free city perks. The municipal ID is a powerful tool to bring more New Yorkers out of the shadows and into the mainstream, according to Breitbart Media. It is now also a key that opens the door for hundreds of thousands of more New Yorkers to our city's premier assets in culture, science, and entertainment, said Mayor Bill de Blasio Thursday in a statement. Those who sign up for the new municipal ID program, which was approved by the city council over the summer. I mean, who are these people on New York City Council? And begins at the beginning of next year, will be offered free membership to 33 of the city's cultural institutions, from Carnegie Hall to the Botanical Garden to the Metropolitan Museum of Arts to zoos throughout the city. Hey, New Yorkers, these people are going to be competing for your jobs, your social benefits, your welfare, all sorts of other things. I mean, at what point do we wake up to this invasion? At what point? Then there's this. Jack, play that commercial for me. This is a commercial that's running in New York right now as I speak.
These are New Yorkers. They work, they pay taxes, but they are still one step away from citizenship. Completing the path to citizenship gives them a shot at higher-paying jobs, access to better educational opportunities, and so much more. That's not only good for our immigrant families and our permanent residents, it's great for all New Yorkers. Helping more New Yorkers become citizens would give a $4.1 billion boost to our city's economy. Cities for Citizenship, a joint effort between New York City Mayor de Blasio and the mayors of Chicago and Los Angeles, will guide hard-working immigrants through the naturalization process. We all rise together. Stand with your fellow New Yorkers and learn more.
All right, I can't listen to that anymore. What about the citizens of this country? And all, notice not once in there, they're calling them immigrants now. They don't call them illegal or undocumented. They're just immigrants. They broke our laws. I mean, what is the problem with New York? What is wrong with these people? And then the commercial goes on to say that it'll add $4.1 billion. How? How are you going to add when you've got people coming in need of services? It makes no sense. Well, that's all the time I've got for today. You've listened to The Resistance. I'm Forrest Wilson, your host, AM 600 and FM 100.3. Have a great weekend. See you next week.